Julio, God bless you. You are always where the story is, and you always get amazing footage of what is happening. I was really nervous for you last night because I was watching your footage come in. I was watching, you would tweet clips and you were right there in the thick of it. That was a new level of intensity, at least from my perspective, from even, Portland and some other parts of the country. Two officers shot. Thankfully, they're going to make a full recovery. There were instances of looting really bad last night. What did you see on the ground?
So everything happened in the evening in regards to probably about like 7 o'clock at night, and they were gathered outside the Hall of Justice for most of the day, and so they started fires all throughout the park, and at one point they tried to start a fire on the boards protecting the windows of the Hall of Justice, and so at that point that's when officers declared it to be an unlawful assembly, and they threatened to use tear gas and other crowd controlling munitions on the crowd. So that's when they left. That's when they left that kind of barricaded zone in that downtown area of Louisville. And so they were marching, and they were kind of going through side streets because they were trying to avoid police cutting them off, as they did another march earlier in the day, right after the grand jury announcement was made. And so they were marching in the street, and they were marching towards the police officers that had kind of cut them off, and then the officers fired two flashbangs that exploded above the crowd, and then about 2 seconds after those flashbangs exploded, that's when we started to hear the gunshots, and that's when people started to scatter. And I will just say that it wasn't a very peaceful march because people were breaking off from the crowd
Yeah.
to break windows, to set more fires, and so I know that there were some news outlets trying to say it was a peaceful march, or mostly peaceful march, and I can tell you that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I saw some photos and some like bystander. I guess they were live streaming it on their phone, where just different clips of like there were people who were eating outside. There were a couple who were eating outside, and people were yelling at them, and then hitting the just as you said, like busting the windows and stopping cars. Like there was a guy who was trying to drive, and there was just a herd of rioters that came out, and they were hitting the car and trying to break the windows, and the guy was trying. I mean, that's dangerous stuff. I'm actually surprised. I mean, I'm grateful that there wasn't anything more physically serious, but I have to say I'm actually surprised that there wasn't.
Right, right, and even and like I said, there was another march earlier in the day where that stuff was still happening, and
Gosh.
usually, as you know, Dana, usually the more hectic stuff doesn't really happen until nighttime.
Right.
But the anger and the emotions were really high after the grand jury verdict
Right.
or grand jury announcement had been made. So yeah, no, it's getting more dangerous, unfortunately, and I'm not very optimistic on it calming down nationwide anytime soon, especially with the election coming up, and
Right.
God knows what's going to happen in the aftermath of that one.
I would hope. Oh goodness, it just makes you nervous. It really does. You had video of, and I'm looking for this video. There was a U-Haul that pulled up, and this woman was just handing out. It was pre-made. I don't know if it's just like 1-800 rent a protest or what you. I mean, it was just a U-Haul that came up, and they began distributing like these giant wooden signs and shields and all kinds of stuff. That I have to say that I've been to a number of protests. That does not sound organic, Julio.
No, and actually, I was very surprised that was happening because initially I could hear one woman saying shields, but I thought that they were asking for people who had shields to be at the front of the march, which is a common tactic that they use. But then as I got closer to her and I could hear her more clearly, she was saying, we have shields," and she was pointing to the U-Haul truck, and that's when people really started to like run over and just grab all this stuff that was. So they didn't have all that at the beginning when they started their march out of Jefferson Square Park. So yeah, no, this was the first I had ever seen anything like that, and it just goes to show that there is some basic level of of
Yeah.
of, of supply chains at these sorts of things.
Yeah, because I mean, I think even after what is it? What was it in Portland? Even after it was, the organization came kind of after everything happened, and then they had their little Chaz thing, kind of whatever set up. But this, I mean, right off the start, it was like it was all of a sudden supplied. Was that the only truck that you know of that was there, or were there other ones in the area?
That was the only truck that I saw providing supplies in that way. But as I said before, the Jefferson Square Park is kind of like the main gathering place, and
Right.
they had food and they had all sorts of other supplies. But in terms of, I guess, more rioty type of gear that was given out, that was a piece of vehicle
Yeah.
being used for something like that.
You mentioned the intensity of this and how it is different from what previously takes place, because normally the aggression and at least the back and forth with police doesn't, I mean, it doesn't really kick off until after the sun goes down. But I mean, it was still broad daylight. People were at work and there were already clashes and with police, and then the in riot gear and all of this. That was definitely the. And I watched another video, and I think this is, I'm looking at all of your videos here because I have so many things pulled up. There was one giant Molotov cocktail that was thrown at a line of cops that I saw, and then you have another where people set one of your many on fire videos where somebody set something on fire and it turned, and there wasn't a huge explosion. And I mean, this is not a peaceful protest at all. This isn't even advocacy
No.
at this point.
No, and I was pretty close to that.
You were
I think
right there. I was very concerned for you.
it was, I believe it was an aerosol can that cooked off, unfortunately, and I didn't have my ear protection in at the time. But no, right, and the officers that were in the Hall of Justice, they had to come out to put out the fires because, like I said, they were trying to set the wooden
Yeah.
boards that were protecting the windows. They were able to put out the fires, but they were just absolutely pelted with all sorts of projectiles, glass bottles, rocks, even plastic water bottles. But they were just getting hammered, and so they had to fall back. So
Right.
actually, I'm actually quite surprised that no tear gas was used in that instance. And so I don't know if they're trying to take a measured approach to this, the police, because
Yeah.
obviously they want to avoid having more incidents with people. But I mean, that comes at a cost because,
Right.
again, they became emboldened, and so they just left that area still in their strong numbers, and it didn't stop until, unfortunately, we saw cops being shot. So
Yeah.
after that, then people started to really kind of go home. But again, it just kind of feels like when you take this appeasement approach and you try to really hold your officers back, it's
It
just
makes it
going to
worse.
lead to people being hurt or being killed.
Last quick question for you. I know that you have because you're traveling as well. We're talking with Julio Rosas at Town Hall, who was there in Louisville last night with the two officers that were shot last night. Thankfully, they're making a full recovery. What kind of response do you anticipate? Because you just said, they were kind of moderating their approach. What kind of response do you expect to see tonight and even over the weekend? Because I get the impression that these riots aren't going away.
I think now that, since two of their own have been seriously hurt in this manner, I think that they're going to really crack down on gatherings. And even though we saw reporters and a lot of media people that got kind of swept up in the arrests of both my colleagues at the Daily Caller, Shelby Telcott and Jorge.
Yeah, and they wouldn't
Sure.
differentiate them being Antifa. Is it just because they're just backed up, or just that they're just not taking any chances? That was weird.
Yeah, again, yeah, I just think that they're not taking any chances, and obviously I disagree that, because
Right.
clearly they are with a media organization, and they shouldn't be arrested. But that just shows the shift in their approach,
Right.
that okay, now all bets are off the table. So I mean, we'll see what tonight holds for Louisville.
Goodness, and praying for Louisville for sure. Julio Rosas with Town Hall. Follow him at Julio_Rosas11 on Twitter. Always so good to see you. Safe travels, my friend. And you do just such amazing work. I subscribe to Town Hall because of you. So just for
Oh,
your
thank you.
stuff. So I encourage others to do the same. Good to see you. Safe travels,
Appreciate
my
it.
friend. God bless.